Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we have a very special Q&A session to celebrate Mercury Cazimi. Mercury is in the heart of the sun today, getting renewed in that big giant furnace. And we're going to talk some astrology today. We're going to just talk about whatever bubbles up, whatever the winged messenger brings us. If you have some questions about astrology, about your chart, about technique, about how the transits might play out, etc. All things are on the table. So hopefully we'll have a very edifying conversation today. And yeah, if you have a question, don't be shy. Please put question in the chat and then your question afterwards. Sometimes it helps me to see it if you put it in all caps, etc. But before we get to that, we have a few announcements before we dive in. So you can find me over at spencermichaud.com. If you are new here, welcome. I am a professional astrologer and diviner, I guess you could say. I like to use different techniques to sort of see how the winds of fate are blowing. So if you need some help with that in your life and should try to unpack and understand some of the patterns in your life, reach out over at spencermichaud.com. I do natal readings, I do transit readings, I incorporate the tarot, fixed stars, the decans, all of these things into the readings. And you can find all of that under the Book Now button at spencermichaud.com. I also offer classes and webinars, and I have one coming up with my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews of Third Coast Mojo. We are going to be doing the penultimate in our 7 planetary sphere webinars, I guess you could call them. We're going to be doing Jupiter on Saturday, June the 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be diving into all things related to Zeus and the greater benefic. We're going to be talking about its mythology. We're going to be talking about tarot. We're going to be talking about crafting a ritual practice and astrological magic and electing Jupiter elections. We got some really nice Jupiter elections coming towards the end of this year with Jupiter and its exaltation in Cancer. So if you'd love to learn more about that, you can go over to my website, spencermichaud.com, and I would love to see you there. If you want to support Tanya's work over at Third Coast Mojo, you can check her out over on Etsy. She's got some wonderfully magically elected oils, soaps, salts, etc., materia, you guess you could say, where you capture the essence of a planet that's in really good shape or position. This is a product called Dragon's Blood, which is a Mars and Capricorn kind of hoodoo crossover. So it's great for protection if there's some things going around in the collective right now. And if you want a little bit of extra, I don't know, force field, I guess you could call it, this is really great for it. So check her out on Third Coast Mojo. You can also subscribe to my newsletter if you want 10% off anything I offer. You can find a link to that in the description of this video or this podcast, or you can find a link to the newsletter at the website. And then finally, if you want to support the work that I do here today, you can purchase a super chat while we're live here today on YouTube, or you can go to Buy Me a Coffee after the fact and support the channel that way. It goes a long way towards keeping the lights on here with all of the equipment and all of the subscriptions to all the services that we utilize to create this broadcast every week or so. And thank you so much for all of your support, and I'd love to keep doing it. So that's a great way to support the channel. All right, friends. So that is our announcements. We're going to be talking Mercury Cazimi today. We got Tom stopping in. What's up, Tom? Nice to see you. Says namaste. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, Tom. I believe Tom is joining us from San Francisco. I hope everything's going well out there for you, my friend. Don't be shy today. If you've got some questions or if you have some things that you want to discuss or hear reflections on, I'd be happy to work all of that out with all of you today. We have a number of astrological things that are going to be happening in the next few weeks too. And it's fun to kind of unpack those together and to share our stories, to see how we're experiencing those things. As of Sunday, we're going to see Mercury out of balance. But what I'd like to do first, while we're waiting for some questions to come in, is just going to show you the chart of the moment and kind of talk about Mercury Cazimi a little bit. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon that the traditional planets go through, I guess you could say. I mean, maybe we could consider the outer planets going through this, but this is a technique that comes to us from traditional astrology where we see the sun being renewed in the heart of the sun, conjoining exactly earlier today, May the 30th, 2025, Friday, or potentially a slightly different date based on your time zone. But this is a coming together of the winged messenger Hermes and the great solar leader in the sky, sect leader, the sun. And we see often important ideas, downloads, messages that we receive around Mercury Cazimi moments. This is the superior conjunction of Mercury, which means that Mercury is direct and is going to be joining the sun in its direct motion. There's also a retrograde Cazimi called the inferior conjunction. And there's a slightly different way of viewing the messages that we get, I feel, through the different types of Cazimis. I have a friend, his name is Gary Caton, who is I would call him a Mercury/Hermes expert. And we've had some conversations about the significations of the various Cazimis. And the retrograde one seems to be one where Hermes, who is also known as a psychopomp, is entering into the underworld or the land of the dead to guide souls to the afterlife. And I often see with Mercury retrograde Cazimi things coming up from our past, ideas and insights and flashes of awareness coming from our inner selves, right? From the depths, I guess you could say. Realizations. Think about the sun as a giant spotlight. It's hitting a big spotlight on mercurial issues today. And when we have Mercury going from the superior conjunction, we can think of this a little bit different. Mercury was also, or Hermes was known as the messenger of the gods. He sort of took the declarations of Zeus, aka Jupiter, the king of the gods on Olympus, and delivered them to mortals or other gods. And I think when we have the superior conjunction, we sometimes can think of that as Hermes visiting Olympus and bringing back a message from a source potentially outside of ourselves, maybe from the god or gods or the divine itself, right? So like being able to hear messages from external sources can be part of what we can see in Mercury Cazimi from the superior position. I would also say that it can really lead to a renewal in the signs that Mercury rules. Now, in this case, this is really interesting because we have Mercury in its own sign of Gemini. So we've got the Cazimi in Gemini, and it also providing resources for our Virgo house because Mercury is the host of Virgo as well. So Mercury pulls double duty in this case and is going to be giving us some new starts in that regard. All right. Tom says, yes, San Francisco. No, things are going well. Many things just not working. Oh, my goodness. Tom, well, I hope everything's going okay for you out there. Tom says, query. Please discuss Pluto a couple degrees approaching my Mars 10th house while Mars is on my Pluto 4th house, all opposing each other. Interesting. Let's see. Tom says, one way I see it is a transformation of my transportation. My car died. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Tom. It's probably a little stressful, I'm sure. So let's try to think about this. So we've got Pluto in Aquarius, a couple degrees approaching my Mars in the 10th house. So it sounds like Tom has a 10th house Aquarius. Are you Scorpio? No, you would be a Taurus rising then, Tom? Is that correct? Would that be Taurus rising? Well, you'll have to confirm in the chat for me. So Pluto approaching Mars in the 10th, while Mars is on my Pluto in the 4th, all opposing each other. Well, let's see. Taurus rising, Tom says. Okay. Um, so if we have Taurus rising, let's just do this so that we can kind of think about this a little bit. So let's move the chart to Taurus rising. And I'll come back to Mercury Cazimi as well. But I want to answer your questions today. I love the interactions, and this is what Hermes is really great for, is unpacking mysteries, and I think communicating, asking good questions. So Tom's asking about Pluto approaching a natal Mars in the 10th, okay, opposing a natal Pluto in the 4th in Leo. So this is, I'm kind of drawing it out without putting Tom's chart up necessarily. But now, as far as why would that manifest as a car dying, interesting, because we've got the second house, well, second house Cazimi. And the way that I would think about this is oftentimes people will look at the third house for transportation or something of that nature. I tend to think when we're dealing with something like a vehicle, that's a possession. So if you think about it as a vehicle, your possession, second house, and I'm not sure exactly how the Mars Pluto part of it could be. Yeah, so Tom says lack of maintenance. House is falling apart too. Oh my goodness, Tom. I mean, that might partly be the Pluto, Mars conjoining Pluto in the 4th house, because we've got Mars hanging out in Leo there as well. But I tend to think that with what's going on with your car might be related to the Mercury Cazimi, because if you look as a Taurus rising, you can see that the ruler of your second house, Mercury, is being renewed in the heart of the sun in the second house. When Mercury comes into alignment with the sun, it has to go through this period of going under the beams of the sun and to kind of, it's a weakening. Although in this case, it's a unique case. Since Mercury is in Gemini, it has a condition called being in the chariot. And in ancient astrology or ancient culture, chariots had these little like sun visors basically that protected the driver or the riders from the sun. So it's said to protect the planet that's going into the heart of the sun from being burned up, from being harmed by it. So maybe this car was ready to go. Maybe this is something that will help you get a new vehicle that is more in alignment with what you need. Maybe it's better on gas. Maybe it suits your needs better at this moment. Maybe you don't need a car anymore. I don't know. That's what happened to me. I work from home pretty much 100%, and I had someone kind of in late 2023, right around Halloween, someone rear-ended us on a kind of a highway basically, and completely totaled I had a little Nissan Versa hatchback, and it completely got totaled, and the insurance we got wasn't necessarily enough to replace the vehicle. So at the time we were just like, oh, let's just save up for a different car. But we were a 2-car household, thankfully, at the time. And we've since gone down to 1 vehicle, and it's been fine. You know, we've learned to share. We've learned to swap out when we need to. I don't really super enjoy driving a ton anyway, so I think that it's all working out for the best. But I think maybe that's part of the car part of it, I guess I could say, is a new start for you and your possessions with Mercury Cazimi. Let's see. Tom says, with Pluto in my 10th house, could be career change, but at 85, I'm not looking for work, but would like to better promote my art. That's really interesting too, Tom. I think that the 10th house, we often in modern or pop astrology, we think of the 10th house as career, which it can be career. But like you say, what happens when we're retired, or what happens when we're not necessarily working, quote unquote, in the traditional sense as a utilitarian part of a late stage capitalist society, I guess you could say. uh, which does not mean that we lose our value as a human being, which I think a lot of times, like society will attempt to cast us aside if we're not providing quote unquote utility to the collective. Um, and that can be very painful. But the 10th house doesn't stop being the 10th house, no matter what age we are at. Um, because the 10th house is also known as praxis. Praxis is basically translates to action. So these are the actions that we take out in the world, what we may be known for out in the world. And there may be some things changing for you, Tom, as you go through this stage of your life with Pluto there. Maybe there is something where you were known as one thing earlier in life, and now maybe you're transitioning to being known as an artist or as someone who is expressing themselves. And that can be a little bit disorientating at first, but Tom, Tom is an excellent artist. Tom sent me this really cool, almost like sacred geometry mini statue type of thing. I think you have to describe it more in the chat, but it's this really cool, like it's got like a rainbow base to it, and it's a meditation device, and it's really beautiful. And I think that whatever legacy we choose to pass on at any point in our life, like that's the type of thing I think that can give us meaning, that can make us feel a sense of purpose, a sense of value that we're providing. I've been having a lot of, yeah, Tom says a Chaldean yantra. Yes, exactly. Excellent. I've been having a lot of meditations and thoughts about this and conversations with people in my life about what wealth truly is. And, what does it mean to pass on a legacy to the world? It doesn't always mean the physical things we leave behind. It can be the kindness that we leave behind. It can be the ideas that we leave behind. It can be our art. It can be the relationships that we've cultivated. All of those things we can count as wealth in our life. And being able to change people's lives or to heal them, to heal ourselves, those are legacies we pass on. When we start to go through and release our attachments and traumas and things of that nature, we're healing the future generations as well, because we're not passing that on to the next generation to grapple with. We're taking responsibility for our own lives and doing the work that I think, some of us could say we were sent here to do. So, yeah, Tom, I think that there is so many different ways to have a purpose out in the world, to make an impact. And even with Pluto there, I think Pluto encourages us to dive into the depths of our psyches, to examine how we express ourselves through power. It encourages us to look for hidden gifts, I think, as well. Pluto, aka Hades, was the lord of the underworld, and I think that he was the protector of wealth under the ground as well. So digging deep in the depths for our value and for what we can provide value to the world, I think is going to be super important. I will say this though, Tom, with the Pluto opposition with the fourth house Pluto, if the other thing that I have learned as we move forward in our lives through our different challenges and stages of life is sometimes what we need to do is learn how to delegate too. And maybe if there's stuff going on with your home that is overwhelming, or if you have any physical challenges of trying to work through all the work that maintaining a home takes, sometimes delegating some of that responsibility and asking for help can be a really enlightened thing to do as well. So, try to keep everything, I wouldn't say you have to have everything pristine, right? But you want to make sure that your home isn't deteriorating so that you're not safe, right? So, but Tom says, I've been trying to teach classes in 3D designing for 3D printing, but finding obstacles everywhere. Yeah, it's a lot to process out there. And Tom, for those of you who aren't familiar, Tom's in the midst of his Uranus return, right? Tom is, you've been on a journey here, Tom. You've lived and seen a lot of things. And I can only imagine when I'm going through my Uranus return, which usually happens at about between, age 84 and 86 or so, this is just trying to make sense of all of the changes that are happening in the world, because we learn a skill set at various points in our life, that has gotten us success, and when things are changing at the rate that they are, like, you're not alone, Tom. I think we're all trying to figure out how to keep up with whatever is going on. Like, as far as teaching classes, like, says with no income, can't hire workers, right? Yeah, Tom. And here's the other thing, Tom. This is the other thing that Pluto might be speaking towards in your 10th house. A lot of the themes that we've been going through with Pluto and Aquarius is the advent of artificial intelligence, right? I think this is a real challenge, not only for people who are entering the third chapter of their life, as you are doing, but I think that for everybody who are trying to figure out how to navigate a world where people like corporations that we were talking about don't have to hire skilled workers. They are able to outsource that to computers that will do it for free or for very little money. And then where does that leave us as real people struggling to pay the rent, pay the bills, etc.? And I will tell you, things are getting really strange out there. There's been some new models of AI that have been launching in the last couple weeks even. I believe one of them is called VO. It was a Google one. And I was seeing video of basically people who had typed prompts into it and were talking about, hey, I'm not a real person. I am an AI created thing, and you probably can't tell. And on some of them, I couldn't tell. And that was very frightening, because there's all sorts of, I think, ways to abuse that. Maybe there will be some exciting ways to utilize it in a ethical way. But there's all sorts of concerns that come along with that too. I'm the type of person where I wish people would ask questions, ethical questions, before they launch into technologies that can completely change our way of life, rather than doing so after the fact when the damage has already been done. Tom says, I've had a lot of accomplishments in life, but I didn't plan it well. Old age with no money. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I know it is. I hear you, and sometimes I feel a little bit nervous myself, being someone who has been an artist, a musician, a teacher, who is a kind of a freelance astrologer on the internet, who, I would not call myself a wealthy astrologer. Like, I do it because I love to do it. I of course do support myself, but we live humbly, within our means, and we invest in things that are, I think, really important to us. Like my partner and I try to invest in healthy food. We try to invest in creating a beautiful outdoor space. I think that we do a lot of things with our garden, but other than that, we're not splurging on like expensive vacations or vehicles or clothes or things of that nature. And that's a lot of times, sometimes that kind of thing can get people in trouble. But yeah, I hope that you're getting what you need, Tom. I guess that's what I will say. I hope that you're safe and you're able to get the food, resources, medical care, and all the things that you need in life to stay healthy. And keep putting yourself out there. Keep trying to find the things that you will bring meaning into your life. And if that means doing your art and helping other people and teaching, that is a great way to stay healthy in body, mind, and spirit. And I'm speaking as a great grandchild of two grandparents that lived to be 97 and 106 respectively. because they, man, they, you know what, they gave me all sorts of secrets to this, because I actually did interviews with my great grandmother at age 100, and I have 8 or 9 hours of cassette tapes of those interviews, just getting family history, asking her things like, what's the secret of life and what's the secret of longevity? And really, the answer that I got to that was staying busy, having relationships with people in your community. They did all sorts of lifelong learning type of things. My great grandfather made turquoise jewelry. My great grandmother was participating in like book clubs and things like that. She also said, she was whispering, she's like, it's also dark chocolate. I was like, okay. So I think she just had a little sweet tooth, but there's some scientific backings in the way that dark chocolate can help your brain continue to make new neural connections. I will say my thing this week is matcha green tea. I don't know if any of you can see this. I'll take this down for just a second. But I have been drinking my fill of matcha green tea. It's this beautiful green. Everything is green on this channel. I think it's the Taurus moon and the Taurus midheaven, but green is a color related to Venus. But I just bought a ceremonial tea set to make matcha in the ceremonial Japanese way. And I've been drinking a cup or two of this a day, and it's really great. I really love it. I really love the intentionality of the process that goes into it, like making something that feels sacred and having a ritual that is meaningful. And it's just it's elevating my mood, I will say too, and I've really been enjoying that. Tom says, U.S. Pluto return, many changes. Absolutely, Tom. There has been some changes in this country as Pluto was conjoining the United States natal Pluto with Capricorn there. And we've since moved past into Aquarius. But yeah, a lot of things going on in the United States for sure. I don't know if I have all the answers. I can try to witness the changes and try to maybe offer advice as to how to weather some of the either the storms or the challenges. But I'm living right along those changes with all of you and trying to make sense of it as I go. Tom says, yes, other things are fine. Oh, I'm glad to hear that, Tom. That's good. Tom says, I think I have difficulties because of my Libra stellium is cadent in the 6th house. Yeah, having 6th house stuff going on definitely can be challenging. Here's what I will say about 6th house placements, Tom, is I have a number of family members and clients that have gone through 6th house stuff. And I think that what I talk with them about, especially because the 6th house, and I'll bring the chart back up here, and I want to say hi to Karen. Hi, Karen. Kia ora. How you doing? Nice to see you. Karen's joining us, I believe, from New Zealand. So thanks for stopping by. If you have any questions today, Karen, I'd be happy to work through them with you. But as far as the 6th house goes, Tom, I always like to think about this in relationship to the 7th house angular triad. And what that means is that these 3 houses are basically connected to one another because the 7th house is what they would call a kentron, right? Which is a goad, you could say, or a tent pole of the sky. It is a place of empowerment for planets. All of the angles are house 1, 10, 7, and 4. And because the 6th is moving away from the angle, it's being pulled away from some of the significations of the 7th house, which is completion. So one thing I often see with 6th house folks is they will get very close. They will work very hard, sometimes behind the scenes, because the 6th house is not witnessed by the ascendant. Okay, it's an aversion to the ascendant. And then once they're ready to get the flowers and the acknowledgments and the completion, life throws them some kind of unearned misfortune. We called 6th house the joy of Mars, right? Where sometimes we get things that sever and separate us from what we desire. And it's not necessarily any fault of our own, right? And that can be extremely frustrating when you go through that over and over and over again. And what I've had to talk about this with, my daughter has some sixth house stellium stuff, Capricorn, and she and I talk about the journey. And even if the public acknowledgement, the final product, so to speak, doesn't always come together exactly how you envision it, the process has is the wealth. The learning that went into the process, the learning that, like, obviously you're very skilled in your art, making, things based on the yoga knowledge that you've cultivated over many, many years. And that is valuable. That is a sign of growth and mastery. And I think that is one piece of solace that I can offer to folks that are dealing with sixth house challenges. Tom says, I got into a community senior club and have been active. Most people there I've known for years, but never joined, thinking I wasn't a senior. Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I mean, I'm really starting to understand the value in places and communities like that. Even as a almost, I'll be 45 this year. As someone roughly half your age, Tom, like, this is a point in life where, even when we enter into, I guess, what you could consider middle age, it does sometimes become more difficult to cultivate relationships. I think there are various points in our life where we start to get solidified in our patterns and habits, and meeting new people and friends is much harder as a mid-40s man in America than it was as a mid-20s person, right? It's just different. There's different responsibilities. There's different places that you feel comfortable in. I don't necessarily feel comfortable in the places that I used to feel comfortable in. I used to spend a lot of time in the music community, and I would go to the bars and restaurants and festivals or whatever that was to see music or to perform, and I would meet a lot of people there. I never really felt great in nightclub, bar type environments. I didn't enjoy the feeling of being around people who are losing control. As someone who grew up in chaos, that just wasn't comfortable for me. And since I just don't like being in those environments anymore, and that was a lot of the social places that I would go to. So it's not unique just to people who are entering into their, I guess, quote unquote, golden years. This happens to a lot of us. So making those efforts and reaching out to people in your community, I think, is a really great exercise, and sometimes even a great service. Like, I've been really leaning into cultivating relationships with my neighbors, and even some neighbors that really bothered me in the past, that I get sort of I used to have a little bit of a grumpy kind of get off my lawn mentality. Like, I really enjoyed my privacy, and I would get really annoyed if I felt like that was being encroached upon. But I've since tried to smooth out and lighten that viewpoint. First of all, because, nobody truly, I think, owns the land. We're just stewards of it, and we're all trying to get through this thing together. And cultivating relationships, even just in your spaces around you, is extremely valuable, because you'll see those people every day, and you can help them and they can help you. And there's sometimes, in an emergency situation, those are the only people you can reach out to in that moment too. So another great reason to cultivate relationships with those in your local communities. So yeah, Tom says the burning path, right? Oh, so Tom's referring to the Via Combusta, which is between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, where planets have difficulty bringing about their highest significations, which again Also probably be very, very frustrating. Ray, hello, Ray. Ray Weather is here. Says, how often do you pick up / read your ephemeris? Um, Interesting question. I would say before I had Astro Gold, I would pick it up every day. Um, the ephemeris that I used to have, I have the big purple American ephemeris. I think at noon. I think that's that book. Uh, Before I had that book, the ephemeris that I was using was a book called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, which had roughly the equivalent of an ephemeris in the back of it that lasted maybe 10 years or so. And that was how I was, seeing where's the moon today? Where is Mercury, Mars moving into? And I beat that book to death, right? It's all beat up and tattered and torn. I would say that my version of an ephemeris now is two things. I have my Astro Gold program on my Mac computer, and I have it on my phone. And I also really like the products from the Honeycomb Collective. If you haven't seen this yet, I'll just move that for a second. And you can see this bigger. So this is my planner, right? Which has all sorts of stuff that's, gives me the transits, but also it also gives me things personal to my own chart, okay? And it has like this in calendar mode. It has a daily mode. This is, I would say, my quote unquote ephemeris. I mean, it does tell you when planets are moving into different signs. You can see behind me, I've got the astrology podcast posters that give you an overview of it as well. I love Honeycomb. Yeah, Honeycomb races. Honeycomb is amazing for sure. I will say that every day I look at my Honeycomb in the morning when I'm about to journal. And yeah, we've got more people. Yes, Kim says, I love my Honeycomb. It's a great product. And I've had really good conversations with that company. There's been times where there was something that a small little detail of the order was not where it needed to be. And I've had really good experience with their customer service. And it was mostly just me ordering the wrong, like, paper weight or something. And like, but yeah, they're awesome. I think they're in Oregon or something like that. But what I will do is every morning I journal. So my morning routine consists of getting up, doing meditation and prayer at my altar space, which we change every day for the planet of the day. So we do an Orphic hymn to the planet of the day. Today we did an Orphic hymn to Venus because Friday is the day of Venus. I will do a little bit of divination. I'll do an I Ching and I'll pull a couple tarot cards and kind of just see what the energy of the day is. And then I will make some breakfast. As of now, breakfast used to be like a protein shake that had a bunch of like blueberries and spinach and hemp seed and all these like different special powders and stuff. But it started to make me not feel very well. I was just adding more stuff into it. If someone said, yes, this is good for health and longevity, I'd just be like, all right, I'll just dump it in the shake. It just, it was just too much. And in my 20s, I really enjoyed just having a bowl of quinoa with some nutritional yeast in it. And that was my breakfast. And I've gone back to that, and it's been great. It actually been losing a little belly tummy after doing that switch, and with the green tea, I feel really good. But I journal after as my quinoa's cooking, and I copy all of the aspects for the day from my Honeycomb into the margins of my journal, so that I am kind of engaging with those aspects and kind of practicing and writing them out, and it does one of two things. It helps me to understand what I can anticipate for the day. If I need to be aware of any aspect that I might want to make a wise choice in reaction to. Like, let's say, like this weekend, Mars is conjoining my ascendant, and it is squaring my natal Uranus. And there has been, leading up to this weekend, some conversations where, with, just over some things, that some family stuff, where if I had chosen differently and not understood the Mars Uranus aspect, I could have gotten very upset and made a choice in the moment to escalate a conflict. But knowing that Mars is squaring my Uranus and conjoining my ascendant, that helps me to understand that I can make a different choice in that moment. And I don't necessarily have to give in to that impulse. I can feel the feelings. I don't want to repress the feeling. But I want to be able to work from a place of understanding, and understand that other people are going through a similar transit of, Mars is conjoining my natal, or squaring my natal Uranus, but it's going to be squaring Uranus, transiting Uranus as well. And that actually really helps me. The other thing that does is that helps me connect in my journal with what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling with the transits, so that I actually have, man, I'll tell you, it's getting on to almost 20 years worth of morning journals, and I've kept every single page. So I have binder after binder after binder of journals. And I started writing the transits in the margins probably 15 years ago now. So I have 15 years of my personal experiences and thoughts connected to the transits that I was experiencing in real time. You cannot imagine how valuable that information is as an astrologer, because I can go back and I can say, well, we're experiencing today a Mercury Cazimi at 9 degrees of Gemini. I can go back into my journal and I can look up the last time we had Mercury Cazimi in the first 10 degrees of Gemini, and I can look at exactly what my thoughts were, what my downloads were at that time. It's not going to be exactly the same, but there will be echoes of that. I can also look up when Mars was squaring my natal Uranus, and I can say, what challenge did I have in that moment, and how did I interact with it, and what can I do differently? What can I learn from that? To me, that's learning from experience. And I have a record of it. So I've got the receipts, and there are definitely times where I probably fell way short of the glory, where I probably let my anger get the best of me and had an eruption or something like that. And now in hindsight, I can see the exact type of thing that could trigger something like that, and choose to make a different reaction in the moment. That is what we call pronoia, the gift of foresight. That this is part of the 3 different types of fate that the Greeks would talk about. One being hemermene, which is the fate that we're sort of born into, that the stars are going to bring us some experiences. They're going to bring us some things that are immutable, unchangeable. As much as I might have wanted to be 6'3", I was born into a body that was 5'11" or 5'10". We all exaggerate 1 extra inch, don't we? But and yes, there are extreme measures nowadays to make yourself taller. I saw this the other day where you can literally break some of your femur and stretch you out, but I'm not doing any of that. But here's the thing. That's the hemermene, some things that you're born into. You don't necessarily get to choose who your parents that you were born to, right? We have fate called Ananke, which is the fate that is created through our ignorance. The planets are compelling us to do things. For example, if I have Mars on my ascendant squaring Uranus, I may be compelled to get upset from some experience that the planet will bring me. But through pronoia, through my foresight, through my hindsight, I'm going to be able to make a choice based on what is happening in real time, based on my experience, based on knowing what is happening with the transit. And this is why it's valuable to just study astrology, in my opinion, at all. As far as just watching the sky and watching the transits, it's not so you could just avoid every single misfortune. There's going to be painful things that happen. But how do you cultivate a relationship with those aspects? Here's another example. My partner and I have a Mars Sun square. My Mars is at 28 degrees of Virgo. My partner's Sun is at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. It's just baked into our, synergy chart. What would you call that? I don't know, like the relationship that those planets have between our two charts. What I've noticed over time is that when the moon or another planet, but mostly the moon because it's regular, activates the 28th degree of some mutable sign, Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, or Sagittarius, it activates our Sun Mars square. And sometimes it's just a very minor irritation. Like we just have a minor disagreement about something. Sometimes I'm just feeling extra annoyed, or you live with someone for almost 20 years and you're going to have some little minor things every once in a while. But now that I know that, I'm like, oh, okay. Why am I feeling irritated today? Or why are we having friction? Oh, okay. The moon's at 28 Gemini or something like that. And the great news about that is going to pass very quickly. It's going to move 3 degrees into the next sign and it's going to be over, right? So knowing that not to make a mountain out of a small molehill like that is also something why it's reasonable even to track lunar cycles, right? Because it activates things in our charts and our relationships over and over and over again. So a really great way to keep track of things. Let's see. Tom says, I used to get the Dell Horoscope magazine and had an ephemeris each month. Ooh, nice. I think I used to get the Mountain Astrologer. I don't know if that had an ephemeris in it, but that was a good magazine. But yeah, I just really I've been collecting a lot more books, but I'm on my Astro Gold on my phone all the time. Like if I see something that's interesting to me, like whether the news story or a public figure, I'm always like typing their chart into the Astro Gold and seeing what aspect they're experiencing. Do it a lot with sports too. I follow a lot of sports and I want to see what people are experiencing when they're having success or challenges in those experiences as well. Tom says Astrolabe also has 84 years of transits and progressions, mostly written by Liz Green. One of my favorite astrologers, Tom. I for a long time before I had Astro Gold, my go-to, if I guess ephemeris you could say, was astro.com, which is, I believe, also a site that has all sorts of write-ups about, that Liz Green has made. So a great sign. I mean, the Astrodienst is what that used to be called, astro.com, Astrodienst. I believe it's a Swedish or Dutch site. I can't remember exactly, but it's awesome. It still is awesome. And there, you can type in and get all sorts of ephemerises there as well. Yes, Ray. So I hope that answered your question, Ray. That was a long-winded answer to how often I check my ephemeris. Tom says, I too had a daily journal where I listed the planets along with my dreams. Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, being able to make those connections is so valuable, and having a record of it, I think, is really important. I started that practice because I was really a fan of a woman named Julia Cameron, who wrote these books called The Artist's Way, and she recommended doing something called morning pages, which is basically, I call it brain dump, where you just, you're not trying to write something profound, although sometimes profound things will come out. You're just getting things out of your head and down onto the page so they're not just kicking around in there all the time. I think it's really important for someone like me who sometimes I will feel something and I it will be a compound of many different events over time. I think this might be a Cancerian quality because the moon collects light. It is something where we can collect experiences, collect emotions, and I will sometimes just reach my breaking point where I'm like, I don't know, I was like, I don't know why, but I'm feeling really irritated right now. Like not in this moment, but like just in a moment. And oftentimes, this might be Taurus moon too, because we will absorb and absorb and absorb, and then just one day it's like, just had enough. Um, and if I have my journals, that it's like a steam valve. It's like I can, first of all, I can understand the little annoyances that add up to one major meltdown or breakdown. And it helps me to also understand that if I get triggered by something that is a small annoyance, that I have a disproportionately intense reaction to, I can go back and trace the accumulation of things that might really be bothering me. Oftentimes we let ourselves we don't let ourselves feel anger in the moment because we have to just live our lives, or it's not appropriate, or it's in a uneven power dynamic or something like that. And then one little straw that breaks the camel's back sets us off into an explosion of meltdown emotions. And I think if you're able to cultivate and look back and see what's bothering you in real time, you can prevent that. Or you can deal with the problem that's really bothering you rather than something that shouldn't create a big conflict. So really valuable experiences. Tom says, thanks, Spencer, for seeing my woes in a different life. Oh, you're welcome, Tom. And thank you for being here each week, bud. Like, I think that I really enjoy this community and just hearing about your lives and how the astrology is affecting your life and learning from each other as we go along, and appreciate your wisdom in the chat, my friend. So thank you so much for being here today. All right. Other questions. Let's take a little stretch here. Do me a huge favor. If you are new here, or if you are just stopping in, if you've been here a while, please like the video. That does me a huge favor and service. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. We try to go live roughly once a week. Sometimes we will go live on either Thursday or Friday, mostly Friday afternoon. The time shifts slightly. Usually it'll be somewhere between 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time, depending on if a malefic is on the ascendant or not, or if it's a fortuitous planetary hour. We've since shifted back to our later afternoon time to get Mars off the ascendant. I feel that the talks go better that way. And yeah, make sure also, friends, that you are joining us for our Dignity and Devotion webinar. Me and Tanya are going to be talking about Jupiter stuff. It's going to be fun. We do really deep dives into these planets, these traditional planets. We originally intended to go like 2.5 hours, and each of these webinars has gone about 4 hours because we've been packing so much information into it. And there's been really great discussions with people that have been attending. Hopefully they will become legacy-like recordings that are teaching material moving forward. And if you missed out, they are for sale in the store on my website. So if you missed out, take a look and see if you could pick those up. All right. Ray says, I just picked up my first ephemeris. I'm exploring the differences between digital info versus printed info. Interesting. Well, tell me some of your insights, Ray. What has been some of your experiences? Have you found that seeing it all laid out with multiple months and years, is that helping you to process and see things from the bigger cycles? I think that would be one advantage from looking at it in that perspective, is not just seeing as, oh, today the Mars is squared the Saturn or something like that, but seeing it in context. of a much larger cycle, I think would be a good advantage to that. But yeah, I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on that. All right, so let's go back to the chart, and we will keep breaking stuff down. If you all have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will do my best to break it down. Whether it's a question about your chart or about astrological technique, we've had some really good questions about femirises, about the 10th house, the 6th house. I just love going in all these different tributaries. Races, definitely. Seeing Pluto at 3 degrees for months on end is enlightening. Yeah, it's that is one of the great gifts of astrology, is not only anticipating when an aspect is going to happen, but also being able to see when it's going to end, right? Like, how long do we have to deal with this? How long do we have to sit with Pluto hanging out on this one spot? And if it feels like we're stuck, or it feels like we're just repeating the same challenge over and over and over again, just seeing that planet that moves very slow is just hanging out there for a little bit. One thing to keep an eye on, Ray, is in September, beginning of September, Pluto is going to go out of bounds. And this is something that doesn't happen very often. The last time Pluto was out of bounds was between 1938 and 1953. Had a really nice, a friend of the show here, Painted Turtle, sent me a lot of articles about Pluto out of bounds and sort of information around that. And we were talking about the difference in Pluto and the northern declination going out of bounds north of the ecliptic, and then going out of bounds south of the ecliptic. And when Pluto went out of bounds north of the ecliptic, in that time period I just referenced, we had all sorts of challenges. We had all sorts of authoritarian, tyrannical leaders ascending to power and oppressing people, murdering people, etc. We had the world wars, or the Second World War, at least in that period of time. But that's when Pluto was north of the ecliptic. When Pluto has been south of the ecliptic, oftentimes we see revolutionary impulses that are maybe restoring power to the people, which I'm in favor of, and I think would be really something that we need in this modern era, where we see an increase in fascism, in totalitarianism, and in narcissism in our leadership. So power to the people will be great. Ray says, in contrast, I bought Nichepso and I'm eagerly awaiting my first robust astro program. Yes, interesting. Out of bounds Pluto. Yeah, it is. I'm still a little nervous about out of bounds Pluto, to be honest with you. We're gonna be experiencing that on and off for the next 10 years or so. But my hope is that it returns power to the people and decentralizes power, so that we don't have all this power consolidated into a handful of individuals, which allows them to oppress people. So that's my hope with all of it. But we'll have to live into those answers. The Chepso is interesting. That's a new program, isn't it? That's a new traditional astrology program, I believe, that probably has some pretty good Hellenistic stuff within it. I'll have to check it out. You have to tell me if you like it. Okay. Keep those questions coming, friends. So let's just kind of see how this Cazimi could unfold. I did a much bigger breakdown in the Astrology of June that you can check out, but I just want to give you some things to think about. Mercury is going to be going out of bounds. Speaking of out of bounds planets, what a great transition with the Pluto out of bounds there, Ray. Thank you. Mercury is going to start the month of June out of bounds. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that technique, it's basically when a planet is going out traveling, or appears to travel outside of the normal declination, how high or low the sun raises in relationship to the line of the ecliptic. in the sky. And symbolically, the path of the sun was related to the path of a king, right? Or the reign of a king. And when a planet is out of bounds, it is outside of the rule of the king. And the way we can see that manifest is that the planet no longer is following the socially accepted rules or laws of said king. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not. It can lead to some really interesting out-of-the-box ideas, especially with Mercury involved. It can also lead to some communication that is probably very different than we might normally expect. You may see or feel yourself starting to communicate in ways like, I never would have said that normally, but it just erupted out of me. So Mercury out of bounds from the 1st to the 20th. It can also lead to some, I would say, probably some very volatile financial markets. I haven't done any real research into this, so don't take this as gospel. This is just me kind of riffing off of what Mercury might mean. Mercury is often associated with merchants and with exchanges. It is related to going back and forth between places and creating ambiguities. But it really does have a lot of associations with the exchange of resources, money, etc. So we may be seeing some exchanges that are very different than what we would normally expect. And I don't know exactly how that would work out. I wouldn't come to your local, I wouldn't come to me for financial advice. I was going to say I wouldn't come to your local astrologer for friendly financial advice, because there are some astrologers that do specialize in that financial astrology. But I'm of the opinion that I'm not necessarily super interested. I'm a little bit interested, but not super interested in using astrology for profit. Like, as far as, I mean, getting rich. I mean, I use it to support my life and to help people, but I'm not trying to like analyze whether the stock market is going to go up or down based on astrology. It just isn't something that interests me. So take that in whatever way that you will. I would also look towards both your Gemini and your Virgo houses to be able to understand that those two topics may be experiencing communications that are very different than what you would normally expect. So, like, for example, in this chart that we have here, Taurus rising, that we pulled up because Tom was a Taurus rising, we were looking at some aspects he was experiencing. The 2nd house and the 5th house are going to be ruled by that out of bounds Mercury for a period of time in June. So, Tom, you might be experiencing like some creative insights with the 5th house ruled by out of bounds Mercury, trying some new things that you wouldn't normally try. Maybe with the 2nd house ruler out of bounds, maybe there's some financial things, like some where you're thinking about getting a vehicle, a new vehicle, for example, that you would normally not have considered otherwise, right? So it can manifest in that kind of way. Just, I guess, everyone be careful of their communications, because this can lead to saying or doing some things that we wouldn't normally do under normal circumstances. So that goes from June 1st to June 20th. That brings us up to a 1st quarter moon, right? We're going to be seeing the kind of the square, not kind of, we're going to be seeing the square between the sun in Gemini. Oops, let's go forward a couple days here. I don't be scooching that over forever. Between the sun and the moon in Gemini and Virgo. And this is happening in about 12 degrees of those signs. And at this new moon, and sort of at the Mercury Cazimi, I guess you could say also, we'll probably have some ideas. Now, I didn't really get into just the details of the Mercury Cazimi itself, but 1st decan of Gemini, really we are thinking about all sorts of different ideas that may be pulling us in multiple directions. It's a Jupiter-ruled decan, and when we have a proliferation of options and an awareness of those options, sometimes that can lead to a little bit of indecision because we're exploring. We're exploring what manifesting that option might mean for us in the patterns of our life. So that can lead to a little bit of anxiety, can lead to a little bit of paralysis by analysis. But as we get forward in the lunar cycle, the quarter moon here is in decans that are associated with, in Gemini, associated with having difficulty reconciling two different paths and some of the anxiety and insomnia that can come through that. The second decan of Virgo speaks to encasing an idea or spirit into matter, into a form, and using our artistic skill, because that's a Venus-ruled decan, to accomplish those aims. Sometimes that decan can lead to a feeling or a desire for solitude so that we can concentrate on the project that we have at hand. So another thing that I think you could see at the first quarter moon at 12 degrees of Virgo is a desire for some time and space to do what you need to do, and a conflicting desire maybe to do something social or to do something exploratory. So there is an expansion quality to Gemini, and there is a whittling down kind of quality, a harvesting quality to Virgo. So that the push and the pull, the breathing in of information and the breathing out of that which is excessive could be something that we're working through this first quarter moon. Now, if we're going to look at some of the main hits here. It's going to be mostly Mercury centered, but I want to give you some ideas about what you might be experiencing in the next week or two. Now, this 5th, June 5th, Mercury is going to sextile Mars and square the nodes. Now, this is interesting because, first of all, Mercury squaring the nodes, you can see here, Mercury at the squaring of the north and south node of the moon, generally speaks towards a turning point. And in this case, we are moving away from the north node of increase and moving towards the south node of decrease. The north node in Pisces, from my experience, has had a lot of significations with trying to bring a dream into reality. When all the planets, many of the planets, were moving through Pisces, especially during the spring, I remember in my experience, and I can go check my journals if you want, because I have them all written down, but I had a lot of dreams about what I wanted to achieve for the year and years ahead. And I remember at this time we have been doing a lot of planning towards changing our outer land into a food forest and getting rid of some of the weeds and just, all the junk. We have one corner of our yard that had been a dumping ground for all sorts of stuff, mostly large basketball-sized pieces of concrete. And we spent most of the spring digging that out and repairing that land. And a lot of it came through dreaming. Like we were dreaming about, well, let's plant this lush garden. Let's have all these fruit trees, these service berries and elderberries and hazelnuts, and let's do this and this and this. And it was a big dream. And as we're getting towards the beginning of June, some of the dreams starting to manifest. Some of pieces of that weren't able to be manifested. Like it was big. It was a big dream. Jupiter, Pisces, does things big, right? And when you have Mercury heading towards the bending of the nodes, you're kind of starting to be at the peak of the big dream and start moving towards either making it real or deciding which of those things is going to be infused into matter and which one of those things you need to release. So this is a really big turning point as far as like, which of those big dreams have you been able to take action on, and which are just not possible to do in this season of your life, season of the year, etc. We still have a number of raised beds to assemble, and we're gonna put together, or attempt to put together, a couple this weekend. I don't know if we'll get to all of them, and we might not assemble all of them this year. Maybe we'll save a couple for next year, because the time for planting is starting to wane, right? But those are decisions that you're going to have to make with Mercury square the nodes. Now, the interesting thing, the reason I brought a minor aspect like Mercury sextile Mars up here is that it actually begins a malefic enclosure of the sun. And the sun being in malefic enclosure, I mean, this is an interesting technique that I really enjoy. I don't know if I enjoy the malefic enclosure, but I like looking out for it, because what it does is it shows us that a planet can be hemmed in by these two forces. So what's happening here is Saturn is casting its ray to 1 degree of Gemini from 1 degree of Aries. Mars is casting its ray. These are both by sextile, by the way, so this malefic enclosure might not be as difficult as one that would happen through either a bodily conjunction or a square or an opposition. But Mars is casting its ray to 23 degrees of Gemini on the other side of the sun. And before Mercury made its sextile, it was breaking up those two malefic rays. So a planet can break it up by being in between the rays bodily, like it is here, or from casting its another ray in between. Okay. But in this case, once Mercury sextiles Mars, it's not able to intervene anymore. So we'll have a few days, nothing super long. I think it's going to be about 12 days, I guess you could say, until Mars moves into Virgo, of the sun being in malefic enclosure. Now, it sounds scary, when we're like, oh no, we're hemmed in, it's Helm's Deep and everyone's coming to get us or whatever, like if you want a Lord of the Rings reference. But eventually Gandalf and, the army comes over the hill and saves the day, right? Sometimes when we have malefic enclosures, things just aren't moving as quickly or coming together exactly how we would hope. And it's an important opportunity for practicing patience, for not forcing things. If there's something in your life that you've really been driving hard on, and then you run into this time period, especially when it comes to things related to the Leo area of your chart, because the sun rules Leo, maybe there's some kind of recognition or identity that you are trying to craft, and it might be going through some questions with all of these planets in Gemini. You may be trying on new personas, trying on new ways of communicating with people, and that can be disorientating for other people, but also for yourself as you go through this. But it's temporary, okay? So sometimes we just have to learn to go with the flow, go with the Tao, let some time pass, and that foresight, that pronoia, it can help us to focus on other things. If the sun's in malefic enclosure, that doesn't mean that every planet's in malefic enclosure. It may mean that one area of life right now is set aside, but other areas of our life can be worked with. All right. The good news is that Venus is going to move into Taurus the next day, and that is generally a fairly welcome development, I guess you could say. Venus is at its home, one of its homes, its nocturnal home or domicile in Taurus, and that can lead to harmonization with our bodies, with our senses, with our materials. It is going to start applying to an immediate square with Pluto, so that is something to keep in mind. Mercury is also going to be coming into a square with Saturn, so we'll talk about that in a second. But overall, the materials that Venus has to work with are the ones that it prefers in Taurus. And that is a huge improvement of its dignity from Aries, because in Aries, the house of Mars, Venus has limited abilities to bring about its desire to harmonize, its desire to bring things together, because it's being given the weapons of war. It's being given the impetus towards individuality or selfish desire, which isn't always necessarily bad, but it is when you're trying to bring about harmony with another person. It can lead to a disconnect. It can lead to an impulsive decision. Well, Venus, when it comes into Taurus, can become much more patient. It can, because of our comfort level increasing with our own bodies, with our own environments, with the beauty that we see out in the world, that may lead us to feel less self-centered, less wanting to fight, and maybe we take time to explore and smell the flowers and enjoy the beauty around us. Now, one thing to consider is that when Venus moves into Taurus 1, it can often bring us the right plan, right? The right plan to make our resources more abundant. The challenge with the square to Pluto is that there may be forces greater than us that may lead to a little bit of a fear of scarcity around this period of time. Okay. And we've talked about a lot of the reasons. We've talked about the challenges of like AI. We can talk about like tariffs. We can talk about political instability. All of those things can contribute to feelings of a little bit of worry about resources, etc. So that's one thing that to keep in mind, is that there's a little bit of that. We could get a little bit obsessive about our planning at this period of time too, because we're trying to make plans to move away from fear of scarcity. We may be a little bit too intense about it if we have that square with Pluto. We might be trying to control things around us rather than let them come to us. And I will tell you, Venus works very well in Taurus because it is letting things come to her. It is that yin, nocturnal sign that says, I'm going to be open to receive, just like the earth becomes open and fertile and fecund. Okay, my favorite Austin Coppock word, fecundity, right? Like it becomes ready to be planted. But it is through that openness and that acceptance that it is able to provide future abundance. So let Venus in Taurus make you open to possibilities, to creating fertility within your life through your acceptance of creating the right conditions rather than forcing your agenda. Mercury conjunct Jupiter and moving into Cancer on the 8th. So this is part of our Mercury Cazimi cycle here. So here we've got Mercury. You can see Mercury moving into Cancer. And this is a shift of dignity for Mercury. This is moving out of its own domicile in Gemini and into the domicile of the moon. We're going to see Jupiter following suit the next day. So this is going to be a big shift in our experience, where we're going to shift from Mercury and Jupiter in Gemini, asking a lot of questions, to one where we're starting to maybe feel a little bit more emotional, where we're starting to feel a little bit more private, domestic, where we are starting to understand what we truly desire and love, rather than just exploring all of the different pathways and options. The first decan of Cancer, I think there's an attraction quality to that decan, a Venus-ruled decan. I was learning a new song on my guitar the other day. I've been starting to play guitar a little bit again, which I'm kind of excited about. I've been re-engaging with my music a little bit, and I I listen to the radio. I listen to, this is how you could tell I'm old. I listen to Pandora, and I have just various radio stations that come on. And I was listening to, oh, what is it? I really like sort of late 70s, early 80s kind of I like all sorts of music, but there is a little window. It's almost like yacht rock or whatever that I have positive associations with because it was a time when I was very young and when music was very new, and it makes me remember my experiences with my parents and my family, my grandparents and things like that. And there was a Carly Simon song that came on. I believe it's called Coming Around Again. I know everybody's familiar with like You're So Vain or whatever, but I really think one of her best songs is Coming Around Again. Really great melodies. And I just couldn't get the melody out of my head. And I'm like, I need to learn that song. So uh, I started learning that on the guitar. And then, as I'm apt to do, I want to understand what influenced that musician to write the type of music that they would write, and what experiences are they trying to show us through their art, right? I think that Carly Simon, this is my long-winded explanation of saying Carly Simon has the sun in Cancer 1. And many of her themes that she expressed are relationships, like love relationships. She, in the video for Coming Around Again, in Cancerian fashion, she like it was the most Cancer 1 type of video ever. Go look it up on YouTube. Coming Around Again, Carly Simon. It had her and like a lover, like watching old home videos of Carly Simon as a child. So the reflective nostalgia, but doing it with a partner, and like, it was like the most Cancer 1 thing ever. But that can be the kind of vibe. Like, we might be really feeling emotional and nostalgic about our past. We could be wanting to develop our relationships with other people as Mercury and Jupiter move into Cancer, right? Yeah, Carly Simon is awesome, Stephen. Nice to see you, Stephen. Hope you're doing well. I am coming to a new appreciation of some of these artists that I'd only kind of heard in passing, but I learned the song. I even sort of made a recording of it. It's in a different key. I can't sing in her key, but that's the way I used to really engage and really feel like I was connecting with that artist, was learning the song and really getting into it. Steven says, my cousin named his daughter Carly after. Ooh, that's cool. Yeah, she has an interesting chart. She has Sun in Cancer. She has Mars, I think Mars in Taurus. And I was trying to think of other features that I was seeing with her chart. Anyway, and I think it's important sometimes when we are moved by someone or something, if you are interested in learning astrology, look that person up. Look up important events in their life. Make the connections. Make the emotional connections. Those are the things that you're going to remember. If something is moving you artistically, there's probably some kind of theme in their work that they're trying to express that is you are connecting with. And that can really help you to like really internalize the different placements, decans, planets, etc. I go through these obsessions, I guess you could call them, with different artists. I just kind of came out of one with Shannon Hoon from Blind Melon. Like, I just, not someone who had really been on my radar. Like, I liked the one song that they had, but I wasn't super familiar with their other work. And but I did have an emotional connection with that song because in true Cancerian fashion, my dad liked the song. Like, when I was like 11 or 12, whenever it came out, like, I remember in our little apartment when he and I were living together, like just me and him for a few years, he had this song on, and I remember coming in and saying, "You like this song?" Dad, like, this is a song that, like, me and my friends like, you know, and we kind of had this talk about it. And he's like, yeah, I like it because it sounds like the 60s or something. I'm talking about No Rain by Blind Melon. And I just remember having this connection of, like, you know, a 12-year-old preteen and his dad finally deciding that we like the same music for a moment there. So uh, I learned more about Shannon Hoon in the last month or so, and learned more about his story, and uh, just connecting with his natal chart and trying to understand why his the bee song Candy Corn. Yep, exactly, the bee song. And the bee video, right? The video with the little bee girl that finds her community after sharing her beauty and her grace with people that couldn't appreciate it until she found her people, right? It's a really cool video. It really took the world kind of by storm at that period of time. I lived through it. I remember it was kind of a little bit of a phenomenon. And it speaks to feeling lonely and then finding belonging. Um, but Shannon Hoon had a lot of really interesting thoughts, and his chart really fascinating. I believe he had both Venus and Jupiter in the third decan of Leo, close to Regulus. So I'm guessing that he was a Scorpio rising, because that would put his sun and his Libra sun in the 12th house, and he seems to have some very 12th house energy, in my opinion. He lived in liminal spaces, and that can teach us some things too. Like when we study people, when we really understand their character through their art, through their communications, and he gave us a real gift. He gave us 4 or 5 years of his thoughts and feelings recorded at a time when people weren't doing that. And they made it into a documentary called All I Can Say. And if you want to get more insight into the mind and spirit of Shannon Hoon, like, it's a great way to do so. Of course, he had some demons that he was trying to work through as well, but that's also grist for the mill for an astrologer. Like, not just seeing people at their best, but also at their worst, so that you can help people that come across your path with anecdotes, stories, and with being able to make connections and see how we can make choices. Okay. So I'll just do a few more unfoldings here, but if you have questions about your charts or about technique, feel free to put it in the chat. Generally, these Q&As this is your time. I try to make time for you, but if no one's asking questions, I'll just talk about the upcoming astrology. All right, let's see here. Sunny D, yes, I love Change by Blind Melon. Great song. Change is probably one of the first songs that Shannon Hoon wrote, I guess you could say. Like, I don't know if it was the first one he wrote, but it was one of the first ones that he started taking around and showing to people. He played this song for his Blind Melon future band members when he first moved to Los Angeles. He was from Lafayette, Indiana, the same town that Axl Rose is from in Indiana. And Axl Rose kind of took him under his wing when he moved to Los Angeles. Axl Rose was friends with his older sister. So sometimes music and art is kind of who you know. And hey, Candy Corn says, I wanted to say hi before I was driving. Yeah, it's nice to see you, Candy Corn. Hope you're doing well, Corinne, and everything's going your way, my friend. But he went out to Los Angeles, sang backup vocals on Don't Cry by Guns N' Roses, and that kind of thrust him into visibility. And he met those band members, and he played that song Change, Sunny D, for them, and they were like, this is amazing, this is a great song. And they were like, hey, let's be a band. And they had a bidding war for their services almost immediately, because he knew people like Axl Rose, and that's not why they had a bidding war, but they heard his music and were like, wow, this guy's got a really unique voice, etc. And it took off from there. And he had a really I think he was, for those of you who do numerology, Shannon Hoon is a 22 life path number. And I've been reading this great book that one of my decan walkers, I think Carl turned me onto this, called Archetypal Tarot. And it is by Mary K. Greer, and it connects sort of the tarot with your birth path, your numerology. And the 22, it's associated with the Fool. And Shannon Hoon has so much Fool energy. Like he just really you could tell that he was kind of almost on the precipice of stepping off the edge of a cliff at any point, but had this like wisdom to him and this like carefree innocence as well. But he also struggled with that. And sometimes when we know too much, it feels like he knew too much on some level. It can be difficult to process that. And he really struggled with substance abuse, and it eventually took his life when he was 28 years old. So it's interesting to study those things and to think about the choices that we make. I was just doing a lot of reflection on that because, Shannon Hoon and I had some similarities in our background. I always often think about this with Jeff Buckley too, who we celebrated. I don't know if celebrate is the right word, but we reflected upon the anniversary of his passing yesterday, May 29th, excuse me. It was the day that he passed and unfortunately drowned in the Wolf River, a tributary of the Mississippi in 1997. And I've examined their lives to see the choices that they made and see if I can make, I don't know if I would say different choices, but to take what I could take from their wisdom and see how it compares with my own path, etc. And one of the things I noticed about Shannon Hoon is that he was getting ready to be, he had become a father. And I think that he was feeling overwhelmed with some of the pressures of touring and wanting to be with his newborn child. And he had recently gotten sober and then had a relapse when he visited the vortex that is New Orleans. And he just didn't make it. He didn't make it as far as being there for his family. And it's a real tragedy. But I feel like that 12th house energy of self-undoing was very strong in his chart. But also the liminal space that sometimes we can witness from that vantage point as potentially a fellow 12th house sun person. Stephen says, Jupiter in Cancer will transit my 8th house, making a trine to my natal Jupiter in Scorpio at 5 degrees. I am a 22 life path too. Interesting, Stephen. So you are our resident fool, right? Maybe stepping off the path or stepping off the cliff. Yeah, the fool energy is really interesting. It can be, coming to terms with innocence, with wisdom, but also just like kind of going your own way in life. And sometimes we have to look before we leap, I guess, too, with that energy. I'm a 23 life path, which is associated with the number 5, okay, which is the Hierophant. So I was talking and reading about the Hierophant, and the Hierophant is kind of an interpreter of the mysteries. So I would say that I'm enjoying interpreting the mysteries for all of you and discussing them, and maybe try the Hierophant's, I guess, job is to help people see things that may be hidden normally. And I think that's what we do on this channel. We try to uncover some of the things that might be hidden and help it make meaning for us in our lives. Stephen says, that Beatles tune must be my theme song, The Fool on the Hill. There you go. Maybe so, friend. Day after day, alone on a hill. Na, 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 do, 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 do. Nobody seems to know him. They can see that he's just a fool. Yeah, I like that song. I like the little what was there's like a little horn thing and horn riff in that one. Sorry, I'll do my little trumpet. Anyway, I digress. So as we move forward through Cancer, we're going to see Mercury square Saturn and Neptune, and Venus square Pluto on the 9th, the same day that Jupiter moves into Cancer. So that next day is busy, okay? Mercury making a square to Neptune and Saturn, and then Jupiter starting to be squared by Saturn and Neptune as well as it moves into Cancer on the 9th. Generally, we would be, many astrologers would be celebrating the movement of Jupiter into Cancer in improving its dignity from its exile in Gemini, which can make us feel overwhelmed with options to the point where we can like almost have a mental breakdown around it, to a place where it is very fertile, where it's able to manifest and protect and to bring things into being after all that exploratory energy. The caveat with that is that Saturn is going to be squaring Jupiter from Aries. And we talked about this a little bit in the June broadcast, but we talked about the relationship between Saturn and Jupiter as far as the blueprint, the platonic forms that Saturn might represent, and the architect or the demiurge that Jupiter or Zeus might represent. And we have Jupiter really fertile, wanting to bring things into existence, but the blueprint that it's being given is not necessarily of the highest quality. Generally, Saturn might desire to create from a place of justness and fairness. Think of the exaltation of Saturn in Libra. And astrology, I hadn't really been familiar too much with their work, but I watched a video just randomly that got suggested to me. I think his name is Kyle Pierce. Kyle, if you're listening to this, really great videos, bud, on YouTube. Go check out Kyle. He puts some really he puts some time into his production values, and he had some really good thoughts on Saturn, Aries, and just really appreciated his stuff. But you know, he was talking about the exaltation of Saturn and wanting to create laws and agreements that were fair, right? That's Saturn at its best. Saturn is the types of binding agreements that we craft a society around. Now, when you have Saturn in its fall in Aries, the resources that Saturn is drawing upon to create a society, to create something, an agreed upon reality, those can be. Is time for change? Is that Kyle? Is that you, Kyle? Like, I hope it is. I hope you're listening here today and that I shouted you out and you're here. That'll be awesome. Like, so that's funny. When we are utilizing the qualities of Aries to craft our mutually agreed upon laws, etc., we may be acting from a place of individual desire and self-centeredness. And that can be really difficult to manifest a fair and equitable society and of agreed upon realities. So we have this fertile Jupiter that wants to create and that really is wanting to, let's see, Jupiter is wanting to manifest. It is pregnant with possibility, right? And think of how fertile Zeus was. He was the begetter of so many children in myth. But the blueprint that he has to draw upon right now is very difficult to create equitable outcomes. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on Zeus. Now, one other way to look at this, in my opinion, is from the mythology of Jupiter or Zeus as liberator. If you think about Kronos, aka Saturn, as the swallower of children to prevent his usurpation, to prevent losing power because of a prophecy that someone said, one of your children is going to, usurp your throne or something like that. So then you've got Saturn doing everything in his power to prevent that from happening and going to more extreme authoritarian measures to prevent his losing of power. So if you think about that, we've seen this. We're seeing this in totalitarian regimes. We're seeing this with the oligarchs, with white supremacists, all of those types of people that are trying to hold on to the illusion of power through material means, right? And doing more and more unethical, heinous things to maintain that throne. Now, what I find really fascinating about this is that even though Saturn's in the overcoming position, Saturn has ascended to power. The totalitarian regimes have ascended to power. They are in control of most of our government systems, in various parts of the world right now. When Jupiter comes into its exaltation, the liberator becomes exalted. Do you see what I mean? So, yes, we have a really difficult Saturn that is in the pole position, but Jupiter becomes even stronger because of that tension. So to me, this really speaks to an ability to plant the seeds, and especially when Jupiter becomes Cazimi of the sun, and we'll look at that in a second, to plant the seeds of the liberatory influences. Zeus, aka Jupiter, the liberator, becomes very strong. In myth, Jupiter or Zeus was hidden away from the rest of his siblings so that he didn't become consumed by Kronos. And he grew strong, and then he helped purge his siblings from the prison that they had been put into. We are literally seeing people being sent off to prisons, the belly of the beast, the belly of Kronos, the belly of social control. And as someone who believes in Taoist philosophy, when you see things starting to go to extremes, even if it's extremes of darkness and unethical behavior, you're always planting the seed of its opposite. So in the darkest times, I hope this gives some people out there hope. In the darkest times, those dark times are planting the seeds of the light that is yet to be born and that is constantly shifting and changing. Just as extreme good fortune or light can be, you can see the seed of darkness in it. It's like when you have too much of a good thing, that can lead to sickness. Okay, it's a constant swirling, that yin and yang experience. So that's Jupiter moving into Cancer, and that's going to build to our full moon in Sagittarius. Okay, and we'll do a full breakdown of the full moon in Sagittarius next week. I will come and do a new live stream for you next week. So stay tuned for that. But that one to me, just very, very brief. Sagittarius 3 is about carrying a heavy burden and carrying a heavy weight. And Gemini 3 is really the no longer being able to carry all the ideas that we are trying to manifest and having to let go of some of them, having to kill one of the twins in the Castor and Pollux myth, or to willingly give up something so that something else can live, right? So we may be trying to bring all sorts of things to completion, but we might have to give something up to do so at the full moon. And then we get Mercury in our Cazimi story, emerging as the evening star at about 6 or 7 degrees of Cancer. Now, I find this really fascinating because around 7 degrees of Cancer, we have a fixed star called Mersum in the constellation Canis Major, the paw of the greater dog. They call Mersum the announcer because it rises before a very important fixed star, Sirius, at about 14 or 15 degrees of Cancer. And this is really a fixed star that talks about speaking out, right? To be able to making a statement. And I think that when we normally will see Mercury making a statement when it emerges from under the beams and becomes visible once again. But when it's emerging from under the beams, conjoining a fixed star like Mersum, those messages could be very powerful, very important. So think about the Jupiter moving into Cancer and then this call to action coming around this period of time. And that leads us to, I think, a really pivotal point in the month and in the cycle, which is the Mars-Uranus square and the Jupiter-Saturn square. So this is on the 15th. And again, this is going to be coming off of the heels of a planned, I guess you could call it, I guess it's being framed as an anniversary of the United States military. But it just so happens to fall on the president's birthday, and they're planning this like display of military power on that day, like something straight out of the North Korean fascist regime. Um, and I think that that is going to uh, catalyze a lot of people towards resistance, in my opinion. Because when we fully unmask the desires of oligarchs, the people that are suffering from those challenges and those selfish desires, their resolve is starting to become steeled. And we've been in the kind of I would say, the confusion phase of the beginning of this with the unmasked goals of the current regime. And I think people are starting to say, well, what can we do about it? Because they've been kind of confused, I think, at the beginning. But I think this is a really pivotal moment. If that does go down the way that it's being planned, I think that there will be powerful visuals associated with that that may start to plant the seeds of its opposite. And that is something that I think is very important. Now, who knows what else could happen on that day with Mars squaring Uranus and Jupiter squaring Saturn in that weekend leading up. That is a wild card. Mars Uranus squares are wild cards. You can see it here. Mars squaring Uranus. This is happening with Mars on Regulus, very close to the United States president's ascendant. So we'll see what happens on that day. So I am curious to see how that's going to play out. I of course I'm always someone who is hoping for peace, one way or the other, and I don't exactly know how it's all going to shake out, but I am somebody who am hopefully praying for peace, but also fairness and equality, I guess you could say. So not peace at the expense of just sticking our heads in the sand and ignoring the things that go on around us, because that's becoming complicit in the forces of oppression. But hopefully, whatever events are happening and unfolding, it's going to be part of a larger cycle, as we talked about earlier, with Pluto going out of bounds in the fall, of liberation and of greater equality. I really do feel like Pluto and Aquarius, hopefully, the positive parts of Pluto and Aquarius is showing the exposing the corruption within our Saturnine experiences, laws, and ideals that are supposed to bring us together as communities. It shows us the corruption about othering. This is something that Aquarius, especially, I think, Saturn and Aquarius is known for is exile. As Aquarius, according to Joy Usher, one of my favorite astrologers, talks about casting everything outside the castle walls. And we see the dark side of trying to cast everything out of what we consider the center. It can be very ugly, right? But by the end of these cycles, hopefully we've learned something from it and are able to repair that, whatever that corruption manifests. So how do we see these things in the larger cycles? But that's a really supercharged weekend, the 15th, 14th, and 15th of June. As we move forward to the 17th, okay, we've got Mars moving into Virgo and ending the Sun's malefic enclosure. Technically, it might be a couple days after that. It might be when we have Mars. Depending on whether we consider the malefic enclosure over sign boundaries. I'm having some second thoughts about when that might end, but I do think that will definitely be a shift there. The That'll get us to the last quarter moon on the 18th at 27 degrees of Pisces. So here's the 18th. You can see if we go back a few hours. There we have the square. Last quarter moons generally are about releasing things, releasing the seeds that we planted and whatever we've manifested, trying to consolidate things into the next cycle. Last quarter moon in Pisces 3, releasing old dreams that we can't necessarily bring into fruition, making a choice. Sometimes when we make a choice, and think about it like this, when you're making a choice, you're trying to choose what you are going to commit to. That is the way to overcome the Gemini FOMO, is saying, I'm committing to this, not like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this. That is how I've overcome much of my own Gemini Venus FOMO, is like, I'm really making a choice to support and grow this into fruition. This was something that, like, when we reflect back on musicians like Shannon Hoon, you know, I had some opportunities at a similar age of being able to choose either pursuit of a dream of a music career or to be a responsible present parent. And I think that the difference, and I'm not saying that Shannon Hoon was a bad dad or anything like that, but he was under a lot of pressure to go on tour for his second album. And it took him away from his family. And I knew as a young person what it felt like to not have a present parent. My mom wasn't around for a couple years when I was a young person. And because of that experience, because of my own suffering, I had to work through my own fear of doing that to somebody and had to try to make a different choice. And I wasn't a perfect dad, and I didn't make all the most perfect decisions, but I was still a part of her life, and I had to work very hard to be a part of her life, and I had to give up some of the imagined dreams of musician stardom. Like, here's one example. Like, I had an opportunity, like, I don't know if this is even a real opportunity, but they used to recruit for The Voice, that show that you see on TV. And it's not exactly how they present it. They would send musicians that were already somewhat established, but somewhat unknown. They would send you an email and be like, we want you to come audition for the show and blah, blah, blah. So they recruit people to audition. It's not just random people that show up. And I got one of those emails. They're like, we've heard you sing and seen your stuff, and we'd like you to come out to Los Angeles and audition for The Voice and things like that. And at that time in my life, I had responsibilities as far as being present for my young daughter, and I just couldn't be in Los Angeles for whatever, like it was like 2 months or something like that. And I just had to say no. And in hindsight, I'm completely fine with that, right? Because I knew some people that went on that show, and they had one person in my local community. His name was Laith El-Sadi. He was on one of those shows. He even made it pretty far. He's a really talented musician, really great guitarist and singer. But he was, talking about this, and he had a little moment. I had another friend. His name's Todd from Chicago, from the Buckley Tributes. What's his name? I can't remember his last name. But anyway, their stories were this, that it gave you a little spike, and then like things went back to normal, and if you make choices to miss out on some things in your life, like, you're not going to get that time back. So this is a long-winded way of saying, when you're trying to make a choice, don't think about what you're giving up. Think about what you chose. In that moment, I chose to be present for my family instead of giving up whatever the opportunity might have been that I was imagining at that time. It's a small example of like what we are choosing to breathe life into rather than what we are afraid that we're giving up. I mean, I could even go back. I like, again, not a perfect person or even just parent by any means. But I remember having a conversation with my own mom when my daughter was very young. And I had a really difficult co-parenting situation where the co-parent would have loved nothing more for me to just be out of the picture completely. But I remember sitting in a cafe with my mom being like, don't give up. Like she was like, I regret it to this day. Don't give up. Like was thinking about things in either or. And this is very Gemini 3. Okay, this is Gemini 3, this square that we're talking about here. Gemini 3 tends to think about things in black and white, right? Yeah, Tanya's here. Todd Kessler is the musician that was on The Voice. Great dude. Awesome guy, Taurus. He's a really nice guy. He's in Chicago. Check out his music, Todd Kessler. Love Todd. Like I only met Todd a couple times, but thank you for reminding me of his last name. But anyway, Gemini 3, sometimes we can see things in black and white, and we can see things as either or. And when I was sitting in there in that cafe with my mother at age, oh shit, how old was I? I was probably 26. My daughter was very young. She was only a couple years old. And she's like, why are you thinking of this either or, your dream? Like either you're like, I was having a lot of struggles. Like, I want to be a musician. I don't know how I'm going to do that and be a good dad. And she's like, you're thinking of this either or. And she's like, this is a mistake I made, that you had to either do one or the other. Like, what if your dream changed to include her? What if your dream is different and included her in it? And at that moment, I was like a lightning bolt of awareness. Like, yeah, why can't she be included in this? You know? So, and it did, and the dream did change, and there were difficult moments, but we were a part of each other's lives and still are. So it is this last quarter moon. Instead of thinking and obsessing about whatever dream you are, quote unquote, being forced to give up, can you include portions of it? Can you think about what you are infusing life into and be grateful for that? It's a really important distinction. And I think it's a really important last quarter moon because we're seeing a number of these planets go through the bending of the nodes and going through a release of some of the dreams that we are pursuing with the 10 of Cups type of chasing rainbows, you could say, with the third decan of Pisces. All right, that gets us to the summer solstice, right? On the 20th. And here we see Mercury back in bounds. I wanted to just highlight that because now Mercury is out of that maverick phase and is acting more normally. And a lot of the tension that we're feeling about, I can't keep all these plates spinning, it might start to alleviate because the sun's going to be going into a conjunction with Jupiter, which I think is a really positive moment. That's a renewal of a sense of purpose, a sense of hope, okay? A sense of really understanding what we love and what we want to infuse meaning and being into. I would say be careful because at that Cazimi, it is going to be squaring not only Saturn, but Neptune as well. Oh boy, I got my little light is fluctuating. I'm getting some chills right now. Something is here with me today. It is my mother's birthday today, and I've been thinking a lot about her, and I just feeling a little presence right now, which is kind of cool. So, hey, Mom, how you doing if that's you? My light is blinking as I am saying that. That's neat. Well, Jupiter Cazimi, a potential beautiful moment of love and of maybe understanding what we need to move forward in the world. And I would just be careful with the square to Neptune, because sometimes we can get a little bit carried away with those visions. And Jupiter is not known as being somebody very subtle. And I'm just kind of in awe of my experience right now. But anyway, the new moon in Cancer is going to happen the day after that, which will kind of codify some of these things that we may be experiencing. Okay. So we've got a new moon that's going to happen a few days after the Cazimi. So here's the Cazimi at about 3 degrees on the 25th. And then the new moon happens. Actually, the Cazimi happens on the 24th, and then we have the new moon on the 25th. So just a really powerful moment here. Two or three other things before we go for the day. We do have, and I discussed this a little bit last week, a malefic enclosure of Jupiter that is going to be happening from the 26th all the way to August 1st. So whatever seed is planted around the 25th, 24th through the 25th, there may need to be some extreme patience around that vision. Not only because Saturn is slowing things down from the overcoming square, but because it's going to also be enclosed by Mars here, okay? All the way until August 1st. So be patient about what you're wanting to manifest. Mercury is going to move into Leo on the 26th as well. So a shift away from some emotional experiences, maybe more towards some more vibrant, dramatic expressions. Yeah, Stephen says, wow, that's beautiful, Spencer. She is always watching over you, my friend. Thank you, Stephen. I feel that. Oh, there it goes. It goes again. There's a little blink. It's funny. Oh, we get these little spirit winks, don't we? Yeah, I don't know if you all can see this. I'm going to stop the chart. Can you all see the lights changing here? Here, spirit, will you wink for me again here? But this light has been winking like crazy all throughout the last 10 minutes or so. And yeah, it's kind of neat. Maybe it's just meant for me. I don't know. But Mercury in Leo. Okay. And it's changes our communication style to one of maybe a little bit more dramatic. Maybe we start asking questions about visibility, especially with Mercury opposing Pluto. So that's another thing, that Mercury loves to ask questions. And so it's going to be opposing Pluto and then going into its retrograde shadow at the end of the month here, preparing us. Okay, this is in regards to our seed that we planted, preparing us for Mercury stationing retrograde at 15 degrees of Leo on July the 18th. So we may really have some insight into some discomfort with visibility, and then maybe needing to reevaluate how we utilize our personal spotlights, how we utilize our visibility, how we express our authenticity. I think that's another thing too, that especially Leo 2 represents, is, are we expressing our inner self, and is it in alignment with our outer expression, which can be a super, it's an interesting journey as a Leo ascendant. It's an interesting journey to become a more authentic person and express what you're feeling inside, rather than trying to either people please or placate what people expect from you on the outside. All right. So that's kind of the unfolding of the astrology. Again, just to review, July, we're going to see Venus moving into Gemini and Cancer throughout the month of July. Uranus moving into Gemini. Saturn and Mercury will station retrograde. Saturn will station retrograde in Aries, and Mercury will station retrograde in Leo in July. And then the sun's also going to move into Leo. So we will break all that down. We're just kind of giving you some extra things to consider. and piggybacking off of the astrology we broke down last week, I do have an I Ching and an animal for you. So the I Ching I got for you, I was asking about what is the essence of the Mercury Cazimi in 2025 in Gemini. And I got the hexagram 18, which talks about repairing, remedying, working on that which has been spoiled, restoration. So this shows us an image of like they talk about a bowl that is like breeding maggots or something that symbolizes decay, and it requires a remedy of some sort. So think about things that have maybe fallen into disrepair with this Mercury Cazimi, and how do we start fixing and repairing them? There is a changing line, the top line. I think this is a really poignant one for the moment we're living in. This is from the translation. Jack Balkin says, he does not serve kings and princes. He seeks higher goals. So this line in the hexagram is transcending all of these experiences. It says line 6 often refers to a person who has gone past the situation. In this case, it refers to a sage who does not bother with worldly affairs in hopes of reforming them, but works on his or her spiritual development. Although a concern with higher things may not produce concrete reforms in the short run, it benefits others in the long run if the wisdom gained from the quest inspires and educates others. Sometimes the best way to deal with the evils of the world is to transcend them. When you do, you will find that your attention is drawn to spiritual questions rather than material advancement or worldly ambition. You no longer need to focus on mundane matters or the demands of public life, but instead may concern yourself with universal goals and higher values. You should not confuse this path with a license to laziness or insensitivity to others. And your withdrawal must not become an excuse for sour grapes or secret despair. Above all, you should not allow yourself to become cynical, condescending, or uncaring. But if you sincerely devote yourself to spiritual self-development and enlightenment, you will benefit not only yourself, but others as well. By setting yourself higher goals, you will become an example to others and help reduce, and even if only to a small degree, the selfishness and meanness of the world. I like that. I mean, this really feels like a poignant example because we have so much pressures coming to us from so many different directions. And it talks about saying, how can we rise above that and work on not only making change out in the world, because we can't ignore atrocities if people need our help, but also how can we work on ourselves so that we're not adding to that chaos? How can we rise above the twists and turns of the wheel of fortune and connect with the hub of the wheel to what is eternal? That is another thing that studying astrology helps us to do, because we can see these cycles that repeat and come back around, and you know, the eternity that is infused within that spindle of Ananke. A really powerful message here from the I Ching here today. And it's changing to the hexagram number 46, which is called ascending, pushing upwards, rising, climbing, persistence and devotion, progressing step by step, making steady progress, the accumulation of small advantages. So this is talking about pushing forward, but slow and steady wins the race, right? One step at a time. As we can have an influence on people. This talks about the wind, right? The wind has this kind of it permeates things. It blows gently, but it can move great things. It can change landscapes. So this judgment that we get here, pushing upward, supreme success. See a great person, but do not worry. Setting off towards the south brings good fortune. So it means that you're making progress. It says, within the earth, wood grows. This is the image of ascending. Thus, the superior person with adaptable character accumulates the small in order to achieve the great. I love that. Great message for Mercury, Cazimi, and Gemini, because oftentimes we have to break down things into steps that are digestible and be able to communicate our ideas to other people in ways that they can understand. Much of the suffering that we experience in the world is through misunderstanding each other and making assumptions. So how do we start communicating in ways that can help us to feel and others to feel understood so that we can actually deal with the real challenges that hopefully will make the world a better place? I did pull an animal for you today too. I got the woodpecker. I like how the I Ching and the animal often communicate and work with one another. We talked about remedying. We're talking about fixing that which is spoiled and like the maggots, etc. Woodpeckers, they work on old wood. They are using their great hammer bill there to work through an old situation, to find new life, to find sustenance. And I think it teaches us to keep working on something, even if there's something that we think is dead or gone, and keep working through it and working through the challenges surrounding it, to utilize rhythms, to utilize the rhythmic presence of showing up day after day and doing the little things to craft something that will accumulate into a much bigger accomplishment. So that's what I've got for you today. Hopefully you're having a great afternoon and hanging in there. Thank you so much for all of the interactions and questions today. Do me a huge favor. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thank you for those who have stopped in. Thank you for our mystery guests. If you are who I think you are, great job, bud. And appreciate the work that you're putting out. Thank you everyone who has supported the channel. Remember, we've got a webinar coming up on the 14th, on that big crazy day. So we'll have a great day, but I hope that you'll join me and Tanya on the Saturday the 14th, and maybe we'll weather the Mars-Uranus square and the Jupiter-Saturn square with learning about Zeus, the great liberator, and exchanging some wisdom and knowledge together. That would be a great way to work with that energy. And yeah, go over and find me at spencermichaud.com. You can also find me on social media at Spencer Michaud on Instagram, Blue Sky, etc. That's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out. I will see you the next week. Remember, always important to remember, try to be kind to yourself throughout all of these changes. Working on ourselves, like the I Ching talks about, can help us to make a difference out in the world, even if we're just doing little things here and there, because when we're kind to ourselves, it helps us to be kind to others. So that's what I've got for you today. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you soon. Peace.